everyone. Welcome to the Dreamcatcher podcast, a place where your dreams can find a voice. Enlightenment can be found in the most unexpected places, including in Western literature. According to my guest, Dean Sluyter, there's a lot we can learn from these beloved classics. We can read Hemingway as haiku. We can learn mindfulness from Virginia Woolf, see Whitman and Dickinson as Buddhas of poetry, and Huck Finn and Gatsby as seekers of the infinite. In this interview, we'll get to know more about Dean Sluyter's unique insights into mindfulness and awakening. Dean Sluyter has taught natural methods of meditation and awakening since 1970. His 5 highly acclaimed books include the bestseller, Natural Meditation. Dean gives sessions throughout the United States and beyond, from Ivy League colleges to maximum security prisons. His media appearances include the New York Times, the Dr. Oz Show, and the Oprah Magazine. A student of Eastern and Western sages in several traditions, Dean has completed numerous pilgrimages and retreats in India, Tibet, Nepal, and the West. During our discussion, Dean will explain the wisdom we can glean from several literary giants he mentions in his new book, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics, and how we can apply them in daily life. He also offers advice on enhancing our meditation and mindfulness practice. If you like what you heard, please don't forget to like, rate, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Thanks. Hello, Dean. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I am so glad that we have this opportunity to connect today to talk about your new book, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics. I just finished reading it, and I have to say that it is a very compelling read and so unique in its approach. So yeah, it was a pleasure to read.
Great, thank you. Glad to hear that.
Okay, so Dean, let's start out by getting to know you a little bit. So you were an English teacher at a very traditional prep school for 33 years, and you've also been teaching meditation for a really long time. So I'm curious to know, how did those experiences from both those professions collectively shape your unique point of view that you present in this book?
Well, I kept coming back and teaching often the same books year after year. So if you keep coming back every September and you teach Huckleberry Finn again, and you teach The Catcher in the Rye again, then you tend to get deeper and deeper into them if you're paying any attention. And meanwhile, during the summers and Christmas breaks, I was off on meditation retreats and sitting doing my own meditation and my own meditation teaching all year. So I was getting deeper and deeper into my own self-exploration through that. And you get deep enough into anything, there's a place where they all meet. It's like you drill a couple of holes into the earth, they meet at the center. So I started to see these places of connection. I started to see that when Huck Finn runs away from his horrible drunken father and in the middle of the night rows into the middle of the Mississippi River, lying down in a salvaged canoe looking up into the moonlight, and he says, and I just let her drift. I got out amongst the driftwood, I just let her go and had a good rest and a smoke out of my pipe. And then he says, the sky looks ever so deep when you lay on your back in the moonshine. I never knowed it before. And I went, whoa, that is the initiation into the transcendent. That is, in fact, specifically, that's a practice that I learned from the Tibetan lamas that I studied with called Namkai Naljor, sky-gazing meditation, where you have your eyes open, you can lie on your back or sit on a recliner or a desk chair and just let your individuality melt into the sky. I went, whoa, there it is. And then I started seeing things like that everywhere. And I thought, boy, someone should write a book about this stuff. And after a while, I realized, oh, it's me.
I'm curious to know, when did you start getting these insights about the parallels that you saw in the book and whatever you were learning from these retreats that you went on?
Mm-hmm. Well, partly that sort of habit of looking at things that way goes back to my days in the early 70s with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who many people know was the
Yes.
teacher of the Beatles.
Yes.
And he
Yes.
founded a university, Maharishi International University, which I was involved with at the very beginning, from the founding of it. And his whole idea, his concept, was to teach all the traditional disciplines, physics, music, literature, from the point of view of enlightenment. And I was actually a teaching assistant there, I was enrolled in the master's degree program when it very first started in 1973. And that made sense to me. Oh, yeah, right. Look, the infinite must be everywhere, or it wouldn't be the infinite. It's very simple. So if I had been, if I'd had an inclination toward geology, I would have written a book about finding nirvana in rocks.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. So
So,
you're essentially saying that we can find it anywhere, everywhere, if we look.
Whatever you do, if you play
do.
if you play the saxophone, if you raise children, if you
Mm-hmm.
flip real estate, there is the infinite must be there. Nirvana must be lurking within it, and it's just a matter of kind of getting that angle, and then there's a way to do whatever you do so that it becomes a gate into that. What in the Buddhist world they called a dharma gate, a gate into turning whatever you do into a path of awakening.
Okay. So some of my listeners won't really know what you mean by nirvana and the infinite. Could you please explain those terms a little bit, please? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the word nirvana, it's often misunderstood. People have a vague notion of it as, okay, some kind of heaven or paradise, or some kind of, exotic psychedelic fireworks going on 24/7, something like that. And it's actually something much more intimate and fundamental. The word nirvana literally means blown away, blown away. Or blown out, like when a candle flame is blown out.
Yes.
So the idea is that when all your concepts of the way you imagine things are get blown out, what's left? What is that your apprehension of reality as it is? And what all the sages, whether it's the Buddha or Jesus or Rumi or Lao Tzu, from all of the traditions, what they all report, really, right? Because they're really out there in the field making observations. That's
Right.
what makes them sages. They're not sitting around speculating. They're talking about what happens when all your speculation is blown out, what's left. And what they all report is, everything's fine. Basically, to everything, to relax, darling, everything's fine. Everything that you worried about, it was you didn't have to worry about it. You had to take care of business, some, sure, but all the and in fact I start the book with the story of my first dramatic encounter with that when I was 11 or 12 years old. And even by then, my brain was in the habit of going, just worrying and churning and all this kind of free-floating anxiety. And I picked up a copy of Mad Magazine with a picture of the...
Yes,
right?
I found that very, very interesting. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so true story. My mom had sent me out to the garage to clear away all the comic books and toys that my brothers and I had left in the backseat of our Nash Rambler station wagon, which is how long ago this was, because we were going to a drive-in movie that night, which is how long ago this was. And my mind is churning. And I pick up a Mad magazine and I look at the cover. There's the picture, oh, it's here in the book, of Alfred E. Newman, who was their idiot mascot, who always had this right?
Yes, yes.
Silly, grinning face.
I have seen those.
Smile. And,
yes.
And his...
I used to find him terrifying, but when I was a kid.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
no, that's fine.
and his motto.
He had this very sinister look, like kind of like Beavis and Butthead. I don't know if you're familiar with those characters. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, go ahead.
But no, actually, it's a good point because people get excited, but when people have some kind of opening experience, spiritual opening, then they tend to think, oh, then this will be the way for everyone. You know, one of my teachers once said, here's the history of religion in a nutshell. One day a guy was sitting in a tomato patch and things opened up for him. He transcended. 2,000 years later, people were all sitting in tomato patches waiting for the great tomato to come and wearing little tomato medallions around their necks. Okay. So the great tomato is, you know, whatever happened to be the circumstances when some opening happens for you, that was for you. So for me, it was Alfred E. Newman. What me worry? All of a sudden, I saw that all this churning, all this anxiety was called worry, and that I was doing it. It wasn't being done to me, which is great news because if you're doing it, means you can stop doing it. And, you know, oh, it's me revving the engine of that car, that garbage truck all the time. That means I can take my foot off the pedal. And I did, and everything went just blissfully quiet, blissfully silent. And it was as if, the only way I can describe it is as if the top of my head were taken off and merged with the sky.
Wow. And don't we all need that right now? Because
yes, we do.
Especially after the pandemic. I mean,
pandemic and political craziness.
Craziness, yes.
And then whatever individual suffering, you know, every individual that you pass on the street, we don't know what they're going through. And so this is Nirvana and just okayness. Just, you know, my best definition of Nirvana is infinite okayness. Just the okayness where everything is okay. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It strikes a little chord, right?
Yes,
because
it does.
we're all looking for that all the time, whether or not we think of it in terms of nirvana, meditation, enlightenment, even if we've never heard those words or thought that way. Every moment when you're, you know, standing in line at the ice cream store and looking at the menu and going, okay, do I want the Rocky Road or the chocolate mint? What you want is the nirvana, but it's not on the menu. So you settle for the closest facsimile in any given moment. Something, whatever seems like it'll produce the nearest facsimile to that And we get a certain amount of that from the ice cream, from, you know, completing the college course, from writing the song, from doing whatever we do, from watching our children or grandchildren opening their Christmas presents. But the awe that the sages talk about, and which I locate in literature, is the awe that's unconditional, that doesn't depend on getting or not getting the ice cream. That is just there, as it says in one of the Hindu scriptures. It's like a candle flame in a windless place.
Mm. And that candle flame is within you, right? I presume is
within you. You know, in the Gospels, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is within you.
Yes.
Right. Right. It's heaven, you know, and it's just interesting that a lot of people go to, I don't know, Sunday school or something, and they walk away with the impression, oh, heaven is up in a cloud after you die. But
Yes.
that's not what the guy said. Is within you, and not could be someday, or might be if you're virtuous enough, is within you. You can't. It's there. It's ultimate reality right now. It's the reality before we overlay it with all our concepts and worries and all that. And it turns out to be pretty simple to settle into that. You know, the main thing that I emphasize as a meditation teacher is stop trying, because trying is self-defeating. It's like, you know, if we compare the mind to an ocean, it's like people look out at the surface of the ocean. They see, oh, there's all these waves, right? All the waves of thought, perception, feeling, and
Yes.
so forth. I need things to be calm, so let me take some kind of oar or paddle and wham, 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 try to flatten out all the waves. And of course, that just
Doesn't
makes the
happen.
water more turbulent.
Yes,
So
it
that's
does.
when you hear people say, oh, I tried to meditate, but it was hard. That's what was going on. So what
Mm,
I was fortunate enough to learn from my teachers that I teach to others is leave the waves alone. But instead, just allow gravity to pull you down a couple of feet below the surface. And there you discover, oh, the water down here is always silent.
that's true. So like the deepest part of the ocean.
Right,
Yeah.
the deepest part of you, and that deepest part of you is below thinking and feeling, is just being, and you're just
Mm,
being all the time. You're just being right now. It's the background to all you're doing and thinking, but
yeah.
we don't notice it because our attention goes to all the shiny objects in front. This is in
Right.
back.
I love that. So what you're essentially saying is that it's accessible to us at any time. We just need to
Hmm.
tune in.
Hmm. And the more you tune in, the more you start to realize, okay, you know, and this tuning in is what we call meditation. And, you know, you do that for a little while, 15 or 20 minutes or something a day. And more you start noticing it. Oh, this is here all the time. This is the silent background to whatever's going on. And this is the that I was looking for in every thing. And it's out here in nothing, which is great because nothing is always there along with everything.
Yeah, and Dean, you've been teaching meditation since the 1970s in all kinds of places. I mean, so you've taught it at Ivy League schools to
Mm-hmm.
and prisons. So,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, what kind of meditation do you teach, and how do you make it accessible to different kinds of people that you speak to?
Right, right. Um, well, the meditation that I teach, and as much as possible, I try to keep it in, you know, plain American language. So, you know, occasionally we'll throw in these words like Nirvana or Kingdom of Heaven, just so people know, okay, this is what all the traditions, what all the sages were talking about. It's not me making this stuff up. Um, uh, what I call it is natural meditation. Actually, one earlier book of mine has that title, Natural Meditation.
Yes.
And what makes it natural is that we're using rather than trying to use strain and effort, we use the nature of the mind itself. And the nature of the mind is to always gravitate toward that place of everything's fine. So that is, in the analogy of the sinking into the silent ocean water, that's the gravity that pulls us down. So basically, I show people how to. Because people do come in with the expectation of they're going to make some effort or something, and there's a little bit of art to pulling the rug of effort out from under them, and then gravity just takes over, and they just sink into themselves. You know, we have this expression, falling asleep or falling in love, right? There's no effort involved in falling in love or
That
falling
is
asleep.
true.
You can't help it. So
Yes.
this is just like falling into ah.
Okay. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm,
And what was it like teaching the inmates in prisons? I mean,
the
I can't
best.
even imagine. Were they
It's
responsive?
Yeah, oh my God, yes. No, it's the best. And people sometimes when they hear, oh, you taught and I still do teach in maximum security prisons, say, oh, that's so great, it's so noble. I go, no, there is nothing I would rather do, because these guys are hungry. These guys, there's a certain kind of wisdom that if you're paying attention, if you spend a few years locked up, or many years locked up, I dealt with guys who were on 30-year sentences.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is considered the worst prison in New Jersey, where I did most of my teaching, Northern State Prison in Newark, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they realize, okay, I'm not going to find that awe of satisfaction anywhere on the outside, right? Unlike people like me, and I guess you, who we've had the luck of living comfortable bourgeois lives on the outside here. We can say, okay, I want ice cream, I'll go to the corner and get ice cream. My shirt's falling apart, I'll go buy a new one. They don't have they can't maintain the illusion that that they can depend on anything outside themselves for their okayness, because they can't depend on anything outside themselves. At any moment, any CO, corrections officer, can say to any prisoner, okay, face down. You might be standing on a mud puddle. If the CO says face down, you have to get face down. You can't depend on anything. So they're ready. They can't get it on the outside. They're ready to find it on the inside. One of my guys stopped showing up to our meetings. I asked the other guys, what happened to Albert? They said, oh, he got brought up on charges. He's been put in segregation. Segregation means solitary confinement. And he was there for 6 months. They actually sent him to another prison. They put him in a cell right above the boiler room, so it was like 90-something degrees day.
Oh my goodness!
With no TV, no books, no anything.
That's inhumane.
Oh my God! It is. It's a form of torture. It should be outlawed. Yeah. It's designed to drive people insane. And some people do go insane. He didn't, and when he came back, he explained why. He said, yeah, it was really tough at first, and then I realized, okay, I'll make this a meditation retreat. It's hot, so I'll take off my clothes. There's nothing on the outside, so I'll go inside. Basically, I closed my eyes and I meditated for 6 months.
Wow. That man should write a book whenever he gets out.
I have a chapter about him in my book, Natural Meditation. I had
do you? Okay.
I had him write his life story to me in letters, and I condensed it into a chapter in my book, Natural Meditation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's now, by the way, he completed his time, and he's now very happily married, has a beautiful baby daughter and a wonderful
that's
wife,
great to know.
and a job with this state, a steady job with benefits, and so I that makes me very happy to
and it should. Yeah. You had such a positive impact on his life.
Yeah, it's a privilege.
Yes. So, Dean, let's get back to the book, because I'm excited to talk about all these amazing authors that you included. Not just authors, like you also have music producers and such. Your book features numerous literary giants like William Shakespeare, Henry David Thoreau, Ernest Hemingway, Toni Morrison, and several others. So, why did you think that their messages that were embedded in their works, why did you think it was important to highlight and bring to people's attention?
Because what makes them literary giants is that whose works endure. There were a lot of great playwrights, maybe not as great as Shakespeare, but whose work is pretty well forgotten now. What makes their work endure, I think, is that it talks to this most fundamental drive that we all have, this gravitation that's making us gravitate toward that infinite okayness all the time. So that when Ahab is chasing Moby Dick, and Huck Finn and Jim are floating down the Mississippi on their raft seeking freedom. And Gatsby is standing on his lawn in the dark with his arms outstretched, yearning toward the green light that represents his lost love, Daisy. That, they're all yearning for something, but what they're all really yearning for is that awe. And the great writers show all the ins and outs, all the thrills and spills of what happens when people fulfill that drive or fail to fulfill that drive. When they fulfill it, it's called comedy. When they fail to fulfill it, it's called tragedy.
Yeah, and I mean, so many of us have read these books when we were in high school, but we didn't have that. We didn't have the experience or the insight to really interpret it in the way you have. I know when I read Gatsby when I was, I don't know, in 11th or 12th grade. I didn't really look so deep into the meaning that was embedded in the story and the symbolism. So it was great to read it again and just see it from a completely different perspective.
Yeah. Well, one of the nice things, especially now that we're starting to come out of quarantine and I'm starting to do some in-person events again, and I've done a number of events tied to this book, readings and signings, and people keep saying, gee, I wish I'd had you as my English teacher.
I know. I was thinking that. Dean, you mentioned writers like Shakespeare and Blake, that their works reflected on certain Buddhist teachings. So how is that possible when Buddhism was not even known during their time?
Right. So historically, right, they never heard of Buddhist teaching, but what's going on there, it's like when scientists in different parts of the world at different times independently make the same discoveries. Right?
Yeah.
So the teachings of the Buddha, there's no such thing as Buddhist truth. There's no such thing as Christian truth, or, there's only truth. There's only reality. There's the way things are. And so, gravity is not British or Christian just because the laws of gravity were discovered by Isaac Newton. It's a universal phenomenon. So, for example, and well, as you'll know, I write about this in the book. After William Blake died, people going through his notebooks discovered a little 4-line poem that he had never published, scrawled in pencil with crossouts, called Eternity. And it perfectly encapsulates, in 4 little lines of simple language, perfectly encapsulates the Buddha's 4 noble truths. It goes, he who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy, but he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. Okay, there's the whole thing right there, right? What do we do about the fact that there are all these joys in our life? All these things, from the bowl of ice cream to, oh my gosh, here's my beautiful grandchildren, so adorable, running around the lawn, and here's my favorite restaurant, and then what do we do about the fact that, my favorite restaurant, they change chefs or something. My favorite shirt is turning into rags. My grandchildren grow up and they're not adorable little tykes anymore. All this stuff, all these joys in life are going away all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So what do we do about it? Well, the usual impulse is try to bind them to ourselves. But it doesn't work. What does Blake say? He who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy. So I love this figure, winged life, as if there's some delicate butterflies or angels or something.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to bind it, if you try to tie it down, you destroy it, you crush it in that very moment.
Yes.
right? How many situations have you known in your own life or you've seen in other people's lives whereby trying to hold on to something too hard, to a situation in relationships, it happens a lot, people being too, right, holding
Clingy.
too tight, too clingy, exactly, and you wreck it. So what do? Go the other way, become a monk? Well, even the Buddha, who was a monk, didn't recommend that for everyone.
Yeah.
So what do? That we get the solution in the last two lines. But he who kisses the joy as it flies, right? Kiss it, love it, adore it, but as it flies, in the very moment love it as you're letting it go. Love it as you're letting it go. Kiss the joy as it flies. And what does that do for you? You live in eternity's sunrise. Now that metaphor, eternity's sunrise, right? There I can see it in your face. You can taste that, can't you?
Yes, it's very vivid. Yeah.
Yes, that's nirvana. You know how it is when you're there at sunrise, what it feels like, the beauty of it, the freshness of the air. It's like everything is clean and new and fresh and anything's possible. So if that delicate moment of sunrise could be all the time, could be for eternity, that's the answer to your question 20 minutes ago. That's nirvana, eternity sunrise.
And that pretty much sums up the concept of surrendering, right? So
Yeah. You know, people hear this word surrender, and some people go, "Oh, that sounds great." A lot of people, that kicks up resistance. They say, "I don't want to surrender."
Yeah. Initially, yes.
Yeah, because what they think is, well, I don't want to surrender my control. But the reality is you were never in control.
That's true.
What you surrender is the illusion.
As you get
control.
older, you realize that.
You realize that. Yeah. And realizing it sooner than later saves you a lot of wear and tear.
A lot of pain. Oh my goodness, yes.
Right. And by the way, the place where you really learn that in a concentrated form is in practicing meditation, natural meditation, because that consists of completely letting go of the illusion of control, of just realizing, okay, I'm not driving. Mother Nature is driving. I'm just relaxing in the passenger seat.
We are co-creating, right? I mean, we do have to we have to put in some effort, right?
After we come out of meditation, not in meditation.
Okay.
In meditation, any effort to create a non-agitated state of mind is itself a form of agitation. Okay, I'm going to say that again. It took me years to formulate this sentence. Any effort, this is back, if you just visualize again the whole idea of the ocean and the waves, any effort to create a non-agitated state of mind is itself a form of agitation.
Okay.
Right? We're trying to flatten out the waves. First of all, you can't do it. There's too many. It's like playing whack-a-mole. You know, you flatten out one and there's five more. But the reality is, the more effort you put into trying to whack down the waves, the more you stir up the water. So people trying to still their mind is a contradiction. The trying is itself not still. It's a form, but so the good news is you don't have to still the mind. The mind is unimportant. The mind, which is the faculty of thinking, is up here. What is important is awareness, is the beingness which underlies that. And that's available all the time. Again, that's why prison is a great place to meditate, because you can't find a quiet place. You know, I'd be sitting there with my guys in our cinder block chapel, and there was this big speaker right in the middle of the ceiling above our heads, and we'd be in the middle of I'm leading the group meditation, and in the middle of it, the voice comes over the speaker: "Attention all areas, attention all units, Spanish choir out to the gym, or last call for medication," something like that. And the guys quickly learned that it's fine. So in the same way, you don't have to shush the environment. You don't have the outer environment. You don't have to shush your inner environment. You just have to sink within to the place inside you where it's always silent, no matter how noisy it is on the surface. Now then, as a result of that, the mind has a tendency to become more quiet. Thoughts have a tendency to settle down. But that's a side effect. That's not the method. See, that's where people get it confused. And so that's why you'll hear from people, oh, well, to meditate, you've got to sit for, hours a day and so forth. If you're trying to do it through effort, then it takes hours till what happens is finally you get exhausted and stop trying, and then you sink within. So when I didn't have the patience for that. So fortunately, I met teachers who showed me how to, just skip all that effort part and let the sinking take over in the first 10 minutes.
What has been your longest meditation? Like, how long can you go until?
My longest meditation in one sitting, actually, it's a great question because there's a good story. I was on a retreat with my old teacher Maharishi in the island of Majorca in the Mediterranean. And Maharishi used to always make sure that we all had to come to meetings every day and only meditate for, some like maybe 20 or 30 minutes at a clip and then come out and do some yoga and do some breathing and so forth. But this was one day, it was January 12th, actually, it's his birthday, January 12th, 1972. And he said, okay, take the day off. Today's the day. Just meditate all day if you want. And I thought, okay, this is it. Gangbusters. This is the day I'm gonna storm the gates of enlightenment. And I got all sat up and I sat down on my bed and I meditated for 6 hours. And finally I decided, okay, that's enough. I'm going to come out now. And at the moment that I decided I'm going to come out now, I stopped trying to meditate. And that's when I sank within. And so then I stayed there for about another half hour. So those first 6 hours, because I was so determined, this is the big day, I'm going to make it happen, that those 6 hours were essentially a waste of time. It was when I gave up that it happened. So really what I teach people to do is give up from the beginning. These days I lead guided meditation online via Zoom 3 times a week. It's open to everyone. It's free. And I guess you'll post my website and people can
absolutely. I will.
Yeah, and also my YouTube channel. I've posted some of our previous sessions are on my YouTube channel.
Oh, great. The link to your YouTube channel is on your website, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Those are some great resources, and I encourage everyone to check it out because it seems like you really know, you've been doing this for a really long time, so I can understand it on a whole new level.
Yeah, well, I've been very fortunate, to be thrown into all these teaching situations, teaching high schoolers, teaching guys in prison, teaching all kinds of. Now, these days I live in Santa Monica. I deal with a lot of people in the film industry.
Okay. Oh, I'll bet that's fun.
So I deal with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Gene, before I let you go, I very quickly want to ask you about some of the 2 characters that really caught my attention in the book. Dr. Seuss, who wrote Cat in the Hat, right? And Rodgers and Hammerstein. I thought they were quite unconventional choices for a book on great literature.
Book on great literature, putting them in there cheek by jowl with Shakespeare and Keats and.
I scanned the book and then I saw their names and I'm just like, okay. So I just want to know, what is your thought process behind adding those?
Thought had nothing to do with it.
Okay.
Why did
you add them to the book?
Really, this is my guideline for everything that went in there, which was that something there made me go, wow, and then I had to follow. Why was it making me say wow? I realized the Cat in the Hat is a Zen master. The Cat in the Hat, he barges in uninvited, barges through the door of this, suburban home And I mentioned in that chapter that that this book came along in 1957, right in the middle of, it was the Cold War, the Eisenhower years. I was in the first grade. We were
Was it the
learning
civil rights? Was that going on at that time?
the civil rights, movement was going. I mean, it reached its real kind of peak in the mid '60s.
In the mid '60s,
but it was
yes.
but it was revving up, and and I was finishing the first grade, so we spent a year reading the Dick and Jane books, which were awful. They were just so boring. Dick can run, see Dick run, run Dick run. Just awful. And then along comes the Cat in the Hat, and he's completely anarchic. He's tearing up the house, and juggling all the objects, and crashing, completely creating chaos. And it's great, and it's all written in this anapestic verse, which is da 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 da, which is reverse waltz time. Waltz time. Yun, dun, 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 like, graceful
It's like
dancers
a tempo
gliding around. Yeah. Yun, dun, dun, dun. But this is da 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 da, which is like galloping camels or something. Or the mafiosi in The Sopranos, bada bing. And if you read most of his books, he uses that same anapestic meter. So I went, wow, this is fantastic. And then like the cat's outfit, and I spend, here he is.
Yeah, there he is.
Yeah, and I spend a couple of pages breaking down the iconography of the cat's appearance and his outfit. I spent some time in Tibet with a wonderful teacher, Charles Genoux, who's a world expert on what's called iconography. You walk through all these temples and see all these different Buddhas and things. You can see I got a couple on my shelf there, and it's all symbolic. When you see that's Ganesh, Sri Ganesh, who's a Hindu god. And right, people see that and they think, oh, this is a guy with an elephant's head, but doesn't mean that people expect a guy with an elephant's head to walk into the room. It means that the elephant is the biggest animal, so he's got a human body and an elephant's head. This represents living. Your body is here on the human level, living your ordinary life. Your head is in the infinite. Your head, that's enlightenment. So in the same way, the Cat in the Hat, I know we don't have time to go through all the details, but why red and white striped, and why 3 red stripes and 2 white stripes? Why are his hand? This is what's called a mudra, the hand position, which just says the whole story of repose and activity and enlightenment is there in the mudra, in the hand gesture, and so forth. So that was irresistible. I had to do that.
I mean, I actually would love for you to take a look at The Wizard of Oz.
I've written a little bit about that in another book. I actually wrote a whole book called Cinema Nirvana, where I take familiar movies like The Godfather, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
That's amazing. Yeah. I'm going to get that book.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's something, yeah.
It's called Cinema Nirvana, Enlightenment Lessons from the Movies. And maybe we'll get together. We'll do a session on Cinema Nirvana if you'd like.
Yeah.
And I made it a point to do just films that no one would ever think of as having a spiritual component or an enlightenment component, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and Casablanca, of course, had to be there, and just show, it's all there. It's all there. So, and then Rodgers and Hammerstein, Oklahoma. Right? Oklahoma Oklahoma premiered in 1943 in the middle of the Second World War. No one had ever heard of this play. There were no big stars. They were trying to fill up the house. They went out into the street and gave free tickets to GIs on leave to try to pack the house.
Really? Okay.
The curtain comes up, And instead of seeing a whole chorus line of girls kicking up their shapely legs, there's an old lady on a farm churning butter. And from off stage, you hear this baritone voice of Curly, the hero, singing, "There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow." So I heard that. I found this great production of Oklahoma online from the and I heard that and I went, wait a minute. A bright golden haze on the meadow. What is a meadow? Meadow is an wild but beautiful, uncultivated area. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's like the kingdom of heaven within. That's this beingness within. It's uncultivated. Right. It's never affected or changed by all the doing and thinking and speaking, because it's just being. When we sink into that in meditation, it's sort of like a haze. You know, all the sounds and the thoughts are still there, but they're, you know, as we were saying earlier, kind of left behind on the other side of this haze. But it's not a smudgy, dull haze. It's a bright, golden haze. Now, that's exactly how scientists who've taken meditators into the lab describe what happens in meditation. They call it the wakeful hypometabolic state. Hypometabolic meaning you're settled down into a deep state of rest, as when you're asleep, but you're wide awake to enjoy that rest. You're wide awake to enjoy that silence. So it's a bright golden haze. And I tell the story in the book that on the first opening night of that show, Curly sang that line from off stage, "There's a bright golden haze on the meadow." And as it was described later by Agnes DeMille, the choreographer, she said, and then I heard something that I never heard before or since in the theater. The entire audience collectively went, "Ah."
Really?
Yes. So there it is.
So they tapped into something that was universal. Like everyone could connect with it. Yeah.
Exactly. And there it is. That's that same awe of recognition that we've been talking about. That's what Jesus talked about. That's what Buddha talked about. That's what Al-Halaj talked about. That's what Rumi talked about. And that's what, on a good day, Shakespeare and Toni Morrison and Virginia Woolf and John Keats and John Donne all talked about.
Right. And I found it interesting that you included Virginia Woolf as well, because didn't she? I know her life ended pretty tragically, right? She took her own life.
Yes, so, she did. She did. Yeah, and you know, this is real life. Yeah, her recognition. You read in my book, I do a whole chapter on her fifth novel, To the Lighthouse. But you read To the Lighthouse, you read Mrs. Dalloway, you read Orlando, and you see that her perception of what we've been talking about here for this whole hour is so clear. She got it. But you know, the fact of the matter is that she had this very difficult childhood. She was sexually molested by a stepbrother for years, and it just wasn't enough to overcome that. And she finally, she didn't want to burden her husband any longer.
Yeah. So she can cope with those wounds.
And actually, and I do a lot of that in the book, which is including the human stories of these writers.
Yes, you do.
Because they're human beings, and for that matter, you know, the sages.
It's hard to think that because we put them all on pedestals. All these.
Exactly, we put them on pedestals, and generally it's their followers, it's the disciples, the people who came after, who airbrushed the picture. You know, who try to elevate them. You know, let's take out the part where the Buddha had a bad day, or where Jesus and then every once in a while something stays in there. Yeah. And to me, it's it diminishes their story if we make them some kind of god that came out of a cloud, because that's too easy. If they were guys like us who had to, deal with their humanness and try to find, okay, where's that place of being, that place of awe that lies at the depths of the humanness? And then, oh, now I've found it, and now how can I share it with others? To me, that's much more inspiring.
Right, right. All right, Dean. We could talk all day, but I think we better end the interview here. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today and for writing this beautiful book. I mean, it was such a pleasure to read, and I'm sure a lot of people will connect with it.
Good. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Of course, and I just want to mention to all our listeners, Dean Sluyter's new book, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics, is now available at wherever books are sold and on his website, deansluyter.com. The link will be in the description box. All right, Dean, it's been wonderful talking to you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.